Greetings. In June 1994, our Aunt Barbara came to stay with us here on our Crossville farm, as she often did when visiting family here in East Tennessee. At the time, I had recently gotten interested in genealogy, and as part of my research was interviewing family members from her generation. Since Barbara was the oldest of her siblings, it made sense to try to find out all that I could from her. And not knowing much about her years of growing up in Kansas City, I wanted to learn more from her viewpoint. And she was kind enough to sit down and patiently answer quite a few questions. I've interviewed a lot of relatives over the years, and Barbara was one of the easiest to talk with. She took the time to give very thoughtful answers, and I felt she was always being very sincere and very truthful in everything that she said. And we sat right here at this table and had this Marantz tape recorder running, recording our every word onto these cassette tapes. And I've recently converted these tapes into digital format and done some extensive editing and added a lot of old photographs. And now, 27 years later, from the time of that interview, I present part 2 of this tribute to Barbara about her childhood growing up in Kansas City, Kansas, spoken in her own words. I'm Steve Roberts, sitting here with Barbara Roberts. Let's start with when your earliest memories as a child.
Well, let me think now. My earliest memory would be one Christmas when I don't know for sure how old I was. It was under 3. My family had, everybody but my dad and I had the flu. This would have been maybe 1927. No, it would have been past that because Don and Ron were babies. Maybe 28. And it was Christmas, and I remember getting a tricycle for Christmas and riding the tricycle around the house. And I know it wasn't very old, and everybody, my grandparents were there, my mother's parents, and because my mother was so sick, and one of my brothers was very sick, Don was very sick, and later on, I didn't know that then, but later on, I guess they didn't know whether he would live or not. So that probably is my earliest memory. Then I have memories of the farm, the big farm at Raymore, but I call it Big Farm now, but it seemed big to me then, with my grandparents, my mother's parents, who would be George Jeter and Minnie Jeter. And I remember my grandfather chasing me around on hands and knees, the big kitchen table in the a big table in their big kitchen, and I thought that was wonderful. I remember, and also I remember him taking me down to the barn with him, where he had a lot of cows that he milked, and going through the barn, making me stay in one end of the barn while he went through and let the cows in, and then he would let me come in after that, and I'd stand with him and watch him milk with those. And I was under 5 then. I there again don't know how old. And also another memory of that farm was us, my grandpa and I, going up in the hayloft where he evidently kept watermelons, took watermelons that had ripened, and had them in straw, I guess trying to save them for a while in the hayloft, and we'd sit on a watermelon and eat a watermelon. He'd cut a watermelon for us to eat, and that was a wonderful memory.
Yeah.
So I was living in Kansas City, Kansas. Lived in Kansas City, Kansas all my childhood.
And you were born?
And I was born in Kansas City, Kansas in 1925, November 9th. And my grandparents moved then up to, and that was at Raymore, Missouri, where their farm was at that time. And they moved to Kansas City. Must have been when I was about 6 or 7, maybe a little older than that. I'm not real sure on that, but so that was when I was under 6. I was less than 6 those times.
Do you remember what the address was where you lived?
Certainly, 2612 Minnesota. It was a big white house with a colonial style house with a terrace in front.
Big backyard.
Big backyard with a lot of great things in the back, including what we called a racetrack. My dad built a cement track around the yard for us to ride our tricycles, scooters, small bicycles on. Plus, in the middle of all that track was a great big swing set that he made himself out of great big poles, steel poles, and a teeter-totter, and what I call turning poles. Somebody didn't know what those were, but like a gymnastics turning, they call them something else I think now, but ain't turning poles. And a wonderful house that was big. It had it's big enough for us to adults to stand in, and it was had what he called a monkey stove, a little wood stove in it. And that was our clubhouse, and we spent a lot of time in the house.
You had a wood stove in your clubhouse?
In the clubhouse, which my father built that house. And I remember it being wonderful.
So he probably really thought a lot of you kids then?
Yes, he thought a lot of us. Yes, he spent a lot of time with us. He was gone a lot. He worked hard, but he spent a lot of time with us, and he did think a lot of us.
Do you think that house is still there?
No, I know it isn't there because Mom and Dad sold. They actually sold the house, but essentially a church bought the land, and so the house was torn down to put a church there. So it was. So it isn't there, and that was much. That was more traumatic for the children, for us, than it really was for my parents, I think, because my parents got to move from there and take things from there that they'd accumulated for 30-some years to a new place, a duplex that they had built, which my youngest brother did orchestrated that move, and it was a good move. And they bought the whole duplex, built it themselves, and did things that they wanted done in it. Or had it built, but I mean they planned it themselves, and then they rented the other side for income. So it was, and they had a little yard around them, and really I think had all they wanted. The only thing my mother ever missed and ever talked about really missing was a dining room, because she wasn't able to have the big family meals like she'd always had.
How was Clay as you were growing up as a father? Oh,
he was a wonderful father. He really lived for his family. He was just crazy about all of us. I mean, he really very good to us. He did a lot of things. I told you about the playground that he did for us, and he fixed up a big ball diamond at the back of we had a field in back of us that he took over from the tax rolls. It really didn't really buy them, but he kept paying taxes on them, so we used that for a ball field. And he used to play with us a lot. Did a lot of things with us, as much as he could. He did with us. He read to us. He tried to help us do things in a responsible, moral way, any way that he could get any of that into us. He tried to do that. He had some, one thing I remember very well that he did was he would be to wake up in the mornings to hear, he'd be singing, he'd be in shaving, and he'd be singing. In the wintertime, he'd sing the what does poor Robin do now? You know, it's the cold snowy Robin or whatever. I don't know that song. And he used to play the piano for us, and we'd march around the house when we were.
Did he play very well?
Pretty well. He was. You didn't ever get to hear him play. That's right. They wouldn't have probably had. They wouldn't have had.
I've heard Ron play with one finger, but I've never heard him play.
Dad played with. He didn't have very many songs, but there was one he played. We called the Elephant Walk. I don't know what the song was really called, but that's what we called it. And we'd march around the house when he played that. And he played with a very heavy hand. But he was good. He really could play, and he liked it. He'd sit down and play. Just sit down and
he did gardening, didn't he?
He did a lot of gardening, which not until he didn't do that though until in childhood. I don't know what he did in childhood. I don't remember hearing about that. In Second World War, the Victory Garden came into being, and this was an effort for people to grow their own gardens and their own produce, and so he got a big garden started in Second World War in this property, this land that he had behind our house, and he didn't go into it. He went into it with full plans. He was very meticulous and somewhat of a perfectionist on some things. He had this garden all planned out on paper, and then he went out and started working on the garden and did a great job with it. We had everything. He had everything in that garden. It was huge. And all my brothers, we all worked in it. Then, but it wasn't a thing we didn't have to. I mean, it was nice if we did, but he really enjoyed working in that garden. And then he didn't plant. He finally got so he didn't plant as much, but then he put in peach trees, and he put in 38 different kinds of peach trees. And so then we had peach trees and peach tree orchard.
What'd you do with all the excess peaches?
Well, he gave peaches away. Anybody could come and get them. He wouldn't sell them, but they could come and get them. And we gave peaches away. My mother canned peaches. My mother froze. By that time they had a locker, frozen food locker where she kept. And I guess they may have bought a freezer by that time. So she froze peaches, and we had peaches running out our ears. But it was great. I mean, it still was good. But he did things that's the way he did things. He would start doing something, and then he would it would become a great project. So
he would get into things.
He would get into things, yeah. And strawberries. One year, several years he had strawberries. We had strawberries also running out of it.
He wouldn't just do it a small way.
A small way. He did things.
He did things big.
Yeah.
How did you feel like your relationship was with your brothers as you were growing up?
Well, it was good. For the most part, it was. I felt sometimes overwhelmed by them. Being typical child, a childlike reaction possibly was that they would bother everything I had, and then I would get very upset about that and tell them they couldn't come in my room. And but Don and Ron being two of them. Both of them too. They were into a lot of things, and so that I can remember some fights over possessions, probably. But also I was protective of them. I can remember that we all did, and I did a lot of playing with them, and we'd play at softball over in a park, and we'd all go do that. Not Bud as much, because he was young enough, but certainly Don and Ron. And I would play with them. And of course, we did a lot of playing in our own yard because of all the things that were there for us to play with. And we built the caves and the back, and I'm trying to think of some of the other things we did, but I can't, for the most part it was, I can't remember any really bad, pretty bad times. We'd all fight about different things. Yeah, but gosh, we were together an awful lot because we did a lot of things as a family. We ate, that evening meal was kind of, we always ate that together until the times when there were a lot of things going on after school, and sports especially. Of course, they were so much into sports.
Did you have any pets?
Oh yes, we always had pets. We had always had a dog. Ron was our real animal lover. I certainly was too, but he was always bringing befriending stray dogs. So we would have a dog for a while, and then the dog would either run away or whatever. But we had several dogs. We always had a dog, and we had several that and they were always kind of mutts. I mean, they were. We had Popeye for a long time. Popeye was a little terrier with one black eye, and we had him for a long time because he would go on trips with us. We'd go on our vacations. We would go to the Ozarks. That was in the summer. We almost always went somewhere in the Ozarks, and Popeye would always go with us.
So this was back in the...
So that was great. I was in grade school. This would have been
40s, 30s?
30s. It would have been in the 30s.
And Clay and Iris would take vacations then. That was probably not real usual for back then for people to take vacations.
We would go to the Ozarks. Dad loved to fish, so he would fish, and whomever else he could get to fish with him.
What kind of accommodations did you usually have?
We had what we called a cabin. We would either go to the Lake of the Ozarks. We did that for some time, or near the Lake of the Ozarks, Gravois Beach, which was nearer Kansas City. And then we started going down to near Branson, Missouri, and stayed at Rockaway Beach. And we always had always got the same cabin there, which was called Island View. I even have a picture of that somewhere, which we loved. It was right on. That was on a river. We swam there and did. I don't know. It was a great time for us. I don't know how it was. I wonder how it was for my mother. We would go down in one car with. Of course, we only had one car. We would take the dog, the 4 children, my parents, and my Aunt Nettie would go with us. So we had 7 people in this car with the dog. I think about that trip, and it was a fairly long trip, but I just remember that I'd sleep. I'd try to sleep as much as I could. So but anyway, the dog we always had a dog, not cats. I don't ever remember cats, and I'm trying to think of other various and assorted other
rabbits.
I know. Rabbits, they were pets. So
Clay then liked to take vacations, and would he like to get away and get some time off?
And he liked to
spend some time with the family.
Fish. Yeah, he loved to go fishing at that. Most always it was that kind of a vacation, and I'm sure not as expensive as. We didn't go very far. We didn't eat out. We almost never ate out when we did that. I don't know how in the world my mother ever managed to cook. I remember cooking at the cabin. The cabin would have a kitchen and whatever. So we did. So that was a wonderful vacation for us. I'm wondering how wonderful it was for her, but she.
How about Nettie? Just getting off track on her a little bit. What was she like with you kids? She was
a little bit like a second mother in some ways. It was a little different from mother. But she was with us from she came to help when John and Ron were born, and then she had just finished high school, and I guess she didn't stay right. She came that summer. They were born in July. She came that summer. And then, I don't know if she stayed that winter with us, and then she moved in with us to help Mom with all of us, and stayed and lived with us then until all of us were gone. And then
So
she
she
ended
lived
up
with you
moving
then?
out. She lived with us. So, and then she was working a lot of that time, but so she lived with us that time.
Did she ever date or anything like that?
Yeah, she did, and she had she dated some, and she had in later life she had a steady. There was a man that she saw a lot, but my parents evidently didn't approve of that too much because that was kind of a hidden. I mean, it's kind of certainly wasn't a secret for us. We knew about it, but it was not talked about. We didn't talk about it. I guess that was.
Might have been a little sinful or something.
I
then.
guess, yeah. Sure, it was probably.
Yeah.
It probably was, and so it was a little bit. That was a little bit. Well, let's say we just didn't talk about it, but. She and Mom, Nettie, of course, worked, but she did a lot around, she helped out a lot too. I mean, we all felt very close to her. I mean, it was, it was just kind of a matter of fact. We had an aunt there. I mean, all the time. Most everything, what they did, I mean, they did all these things. They focused on the family. That. My mother did a lot of, she was very active in things like PTA. She was always active with the Bethany Hospital, like the Guild. She was active with the Grandview Park Presbyterian Church. She did a lot of outside things as well as family things, but she was always there for us. We knew she was going to be there. Of course, all during grade school, we went home for lunch. So she was there. She served us breakfast in the morning. We had breakfast in the morning. We went home for lunch and then dinner together at night.
So I think of her as a cooking grandmother. She was the same thing as a mother.
Yeah.
Yeah.
She was, and I remember wonderful. I can remember there were favorite things we had with wonderful food. That was really good, and I didn't really want to do that much cooking. She was willing to teach me about cooking. I didn't really want to do that much, and I don't know whether, she maybe had control of that kitchen pretty much too, but I don't remember wanting to get in there and cook. But I know I learned a lot of things from her without, I just know she did those things. I know the things I do that I know she did, and I learned them from her that way.
Did Clay do much in the kitchen ever?
He did like to, he would cook, not a lot. He did in later years, but yes, he would cook if she was away, which wasn't very often. He would cook. He was able to would cook things.
You have a barbecue on the grill
barbecue,
or anything?
yeah, he did in later years. Well, he built a fireplace, oven in the backyard. I'd forgotten about that until somebody mentioned that. Sherry, I think, mentioned that. And he would grill on that. Of course, hamburgers and whatever. And he would, and he certainly eggs, and he would fix those kind of things sometimes. He didn't do very much because he actually wouldn't have had the time. He would have been on mostly, but he liked it. He would do it. I mean, he certainly wasn't one who wouldn't do that. Now, I don't think he did much changing of diapers and such until the grandchildren came along.
And he was a hard worker then.
He was a very hard worker.
Which I understand all the brothers were.
Yeah, he was not only a hard worker. He was a hard worker, and he was a stickler for us starting, not always finishing a job when we started it, and for us doing the very best we could. He always told us in school, and when we all went off to college, and he was bound and determined we were all going off to University of Kansas, where he went, which we all did. Finally, all graduated after took a lot to get us all through, but we did it. And he always said, keep ahead of the hounds. That was which meant keep that studying up, and he had to tell us that a lot. He had to tell my brothers that. Told me that, and we all made it. And he was very proud of that, very, very proud that we all graduated from college.
Yeah.
was a goal of his. But he was very, his family meant everything to him. He was, I think I started in on that. Mother, and it did to Mother too, but she had, well, they had a lot of friends outside, but she was certainly involved too with family.
Sounds like they were very civilized.
Yes, yes.
Were there?
They were.
Do you remember spankings much or anything like that?
Not very much.
Yeah.
In fact, I can hardly remember. I don't know. I don't know that I can remember spankings. I can remember that we used to play one against the other. We'd we'd do the thing of telling one that the other one said we could do it. And it was hard for Dad to turn us down about anything. But they would talk things over. They would confer about, certainly they would confer about.
Any other hobbies that you remember Clay had other than bird watching?
He loved building, making things like with wood. He made us furniture like these were, well, we called them doll cabinets, but they were big cabinets. Well done, all well finished and beautifully done, and tables and chairs he would make with that were not just tiny things. I mean, these were bigger tables, and then later he made like almost card table size tables, and he would they were always well done. I mean, they were nicely finished and very well done. And he went through a time when he used all the paint he used. Everything was Chinese red, so he had this red paint on the childhood furniture that he made. And I remember one of the tables that was around for a long time. I don't know what happened to that table, whether anyone still has that or not. That was painted that Chinese red. So he had the Chinese red era there. So he had a great, he had a good sense of humor too, because we could kid him about that. We would
about
get
the red.
Yeah, about going through the Chinese red.
And he's good with working his hands.
So he certainly did that. Fishing, he loved fishing.
Yeah.
He wasn't a hunter, never hunted. Didn't like guns. Didn't like to have, never had a gun around. Didn't hunt at all.
And Clay and Iris's relationship always seemed to be good.
Seemed good. I mean, we didn't, as far as I knew, I never knew of any.
No major fights.
No. I mean, they would have disagreements, and maybe about us, the children. I mean, maybe. I don't know. I don't. But I don't remember. I mean, I just remember it being a good relationship. I don't remember.
Well, it sounds like a nice family, the 4 kids, and he worked, and,
right.
and Iris stayed home and cooked, and did her community service.
Did community service. Yeah. Certainly a lot of community service.
Yeah.
When we were in grade school, we used to walk down to the show, as it was called then, the movie, which was quite a walk. They'd give us each a quarter, I think it was. And if we took the streetcar, that cost a nickel, so that would, if we walked, why, that we could have an extra treat at the show, so we'd often walk and spend several hours there, because we'd watch those serials. They'd have those serials going on, where you were left in suspense waiting for the next, so you'd come back the next week and walk home. The movie probably was 10 cents, and then we'd have a treat and we'd walk back home again. Those were good. Well, they were good days. I know that Don and Ron and I did that. I don't remember Bud doing that as much. Of course, he was 6 years younger than I was, so.
Probably.
But anyway, that was good. Saturdays, Sundays, we often went to many Sundays as we were in grade school. We went to to Minnie and George's, to my grandparents, who lived about 10 miles out of Kansas City, Kansas.
Is that Raymore?
No, this is about, they had moved out to Summer Lake Gardens then on a move from.
Was that still a farm? Or?
It was a farm. It was a small farm, And we loved it. We'd have a big dinner in the. Of course, we were going to Sunday school at that point with to Grandview Park Presbyterian Church. So this must have been after that. And it was just, it wasn't a long drive at all. It's real close to where Bud lives now. And have this big dinner on Sundays, and in the summer we'd all spend time out there, not all together, although I think Don and Ron usually went together. And I would spend time out there too in the summer.
Did Clay seem to get along good with the in-laws?
Yes, he did. He was very good. Did get along with them, and he was very good to them. He was. He and Uncle Carl, he and his brother Carl, bought that land out where they built the house, and then Dad built the house had the house built for Grandpa and Grandma.
You say he built some furniture or something like that?
Yes, he built furniture for all of us.
When you were kids?
When we were kids. He always had, he was a perfectionist as far as any work he did was of note. It was just gorgeous work, always. And, but he built a lot of furniture. He built what he called doll cabinets, but they were fairly large cabinets, and tables and chairs. And he built some of those, and some of those full sized that I think some of those are still around. We all remember him doing that. And he didn't want us to. He was very particular about his tools. We weren't supposed to be taking his tools and using them for other things.
And you say he always liked to finish a job that he started.
Yes, he always liked to finish a job he started.
And he didn't like you when you didn't.
He didn't like it when we didn't finish a job.
Yeah, when he
started.
And I find that too, that if you get a job started and you don't finish it, then you may never finish it.
Never finish it. And he always said that you need to finish a job when you start it.
Yeah.
And I think about that too. When I'm doing yard work, and I'm out there doing yard work, and I think, I hate picking up I don't mind like pruning things and whatever, but I hate picking up the clippings and doing that. I just never have liked doing that. But I think, well, got to finish this. Dad would have said,
wanted it that way,
finish this. Yes, finish the job you get started. When you start a job, finish it.
When you start a job, finish it. Great words of wisdom from my grandfather Clay. That concludes part 2 of this tribute to our Aunt Barbara. There are more audio recordings and more old photographs, so I guess it's time to get busy. Start a job, finish it. Stay tuned.